Imagine you're walking down your street, right?
Oh, sure. Just normal day.
Yeah, exactly. Just walking. And you spot this familiar leafy plant sort of sprouting from the concrete, and you decide to, I don't know, make a salad out of it.
Which is a bold move to begin with.
Right. But now imagine that salad could either be this traditional medicinal remedy or, and this is the kicker, it could severely poison you.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's a gamble.
It really is. So today we are doing a deep dive into a master of botanical disguise. I mean, we're talking about a plant that perfectly mimics your favorite grocery store vegetables.
Right. It just hides right out there in plain sight.
Exactly, on mundane street corners. And it forces us to ask this question, like, how often are our own eyes lying to us about the wild nature lurking in our own neighborhoods?
It's a great question. We really don't pay attention.
We don't. Okay, let's unpack this. Our focal point today is an incredibly revealing dispatch from May 8th, 2026.
Yeah, the blog post.
Right. It's a post by an author named Ang, and it's part of the series called Notes on Gardening. Specifically, this is part 888.
Wow. Part 888.
I know, right? And the title is The Deceptive Beauty of Black Nightshade. And then, in parentheses, the scientific name, Solanum nigrum.
Solanum nigrum.
Yeah. And right away, that number, part 888, I mean, that tells us we are not dealing with a casual observer here.
No, definitely not. We are dealing with someone who has spent immense time cataloging the natural world.
Right.
You know, someone possessing a highly trained eye. And yet, and this is the wild part, the entire narrative hinges on that trained eye being completely fooled.
Fooled by a weed.
Exactly. A weed just growing on a typical street corner.
It's crazy.
It is. Because the author's experience, it really captures this universal vulnerability and how humans perceive their environment. Like, we assume that because we paved a street, you know, we have domesticated everything on it.
Right, like we're in control.
Exactly. But we haven't. We just built a stage for wild nature to put on a grocery store costume, basically.
Okay. A grocery store costume. I love that. And it starts with, you know, the most innocent assumption imaginable.
Oh, for sure.
The author spots this plant growing casually around the corner, and based purely on the shape of the leaves, they categorize it immediately.
They think it's a chili plant.
Right. They think it's a chili plant. And if you are listening to this right now thinking, well, I would never be naive enough to misidentify a wild plant.
You probably would.
You absolutely would, because you have to consider how deeply ingrained your grocery store conditioning really is.
Yeah.
Like, we don't analyze every object we pass, right?
Yeah.
We just rapidly sort them into familiar buckets.
What's fascinating here is the psychology behind that, right? The human brain is this insanely energy-hungry organ.
Oh, yeah.
And it's constantly seeking to minimize its cognitive load.
Mm.
So when you are walking through an urban environment, you are just bombarded with sensory data.
Cars, people, noises.
Everything. So to process all of it, your brain relies heavily on heuristics.
Like mental shortcuts.
Exactly. Mental shortcuts. You have a mental file folder for, quote-unquote, domesticated plants. And the moment your eye catches a specific leaf margin or vein structure,
it just pulls the most accessible reference.
right, in this case, a chili plant. You map the known onto the unknown because, honestly, it feels safer.
That makes total sense. It's like a phishing scam in nature.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. The plant is sending this visual email that perfectly copies the branding of a trusted entity.
A harmless vegetable.
Exactly. Hoping your brain will blindly click the link without checking the URL, you see a green leaf in a human space, and you just assume it plays by human rules.
Yeah, but the deception relies entirely on our lazy cognitive processing. I mean, the plant isn't actively trying to trick us, you know.
Right, it doesn't have an evil master plan.
No, it is simply optimizing for its own survival. But, and this is where the story shifts, the illusion completely shatters when the visual data updates.
Right, time passes.
Yeah. The author walks past that same street corner at a later date, and the plant has entered its fruiting stage.
And spoiler alert, the chilies are nowhere to be found.
No there.
Instead, the plant has produced these small, round, incredibly glossy berries.
They look so perfect.
They really do. So the physical evidence completely contradicts the initial mental assumption. But human pattern recognition is profoundly stubborn, isn't it?
Oh, it really is.
Because instead of stepping back and admitting, like, total ignorance, the author's brain just scrambles for the next closest familiar folder.
Right. We pivot to the next domestic assumption that fits the new visual parameters.
Yeah.
Because you see round, glossy, clustered berries on a leafy green plant. The mind immediately categorizes them as tomatoes.
Tomatoes, of course.
We are so desperate for the world to remain familiar that we continually force wild data into these domesticated frameworks.
But there is a massive glitch in this new tomato theory, and it's the color.
The color is a huge red flag or, well, purple flag.
Yeah, because these berries are not the comforting, vibrant red of a cherry tomato.
Yeah.
They are this deep, dark, heavy purple.
Yeah.
It is the visual equivalent of a record scratch. You look at it, and the color alone signals that something in your mental matrix is just fundamentally broken.
Absolutely.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the failure of that pattern recognition forces the author to finally abandon their assumptions, right?
Yeah. We have to face the fact.
They turn to actual taxonomy. And the unmasking of this plant completely flips the narrative.
The transition from perception to reality is just stark. I mean, by identifying the plant scientifically, the author strips away that grocery store camouflage.
Right.
It isn't a chili, and it isn't a purple heirloom tomato.
Mm-hmm.
It is Solanum nigrum.
Black Nightshade. I
Yeah.
mean, let's just sit with the sheer weight of that name for a moment. Black Nightshade.
It's heavy.
It is. We go from chili and tomato words that evoke like summer barbecues and warm kitchens and absolute safety to Black Nightshade.
It sounds sinister.
It sounds like a cursed item in a gothic horror novel.
Totally.
It is completely jarring to look at a plant with these adorable, shiny little berries and realize it carries a name that sounds like an elite assassin.
The linguistics here are fascinating, though.
Yeah.
Because naming something fundamentally alters our psychological relationship
Oh,
to it.
for sure. How so?
Well, when you label the plant a tomato, your stance is one of dominance and utility, right?
Like, I'm going to eat you.
Exactly. The plant is a vegetable. It exists to serve your culinary needs. But the moment you apply the name Black Nightshade, the psychological distance widens instantly.
It really does. It demands an entirely different posture. You go from feeling hungry to feeling cautious, very cautious.
Right. The name commands reverence and a healthy dose of fear. It recontextualizes those shiny berries not as an invitation to eat, but as a potential warning.
A huge warning.
And furthermore, the author notes the local name for the plant too, Terung Maranti.
Terung Maranti.
Yeah, and this adds a really crucial layer of cultural dimension.
It proves the plant isn't just a sterile scientific curiosity hanging out on a street corner.
Exactly.
It has a deeply embedded identity within that specific region.
Yeah, because a local name signifies a long-standing generational relationship between the local human population and the specific species.
It's not new to them.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It implies a cultural footprint, a shared understanding of what this plant is, and, more importantly, what it can do. It's this linguistic marker of ancestral knowledge that casual passersby are completely oblivious to.
Completely oblivious. Which leads us directly into the most contradictory, mind-bending part of this entire discovery.
Oh, the paradox.
Yes, because the author issues a very clear, stark warning about Black Nightshade. Despite looking like a delicious bite-sized snack, the entire plant has a high level of toxicity.
High level.
Not just the roots, not just the stems, the whole thing is highly toxic.
This hazard hiding in plain sight.
Right. But then, right after establishing this immense danger, the author drops a massive paradox.
Yeah.
Because despite this high level of toxicity, the plant has a documented history in traditional medicine and even in certain cuisines.
It's wild to think about.
It's crazy. I mean, I need help making sense of the mechanics of human history here. If the entire plant is known to be highly toxic, how on earth did it ever end up in cuisines or medicine?
It's a fair question.
Like, who was the first person walking through the wilderness, looking at a poisonous plant and thinking, you know, I bet if I prepare this just right, it'll make a great soup.
I mean, it seems utterly irrational from our modern perspective of prepackaged safety risks.
Absolutely.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we are looking at the brutal, high-stakes reality of humanity's trial-and-error relationship with the natural world.
Right.
We often romanticize ancestral foraging, picturing early humans plucking perfect fruits in a harmonious Eden.
Just grazing peacefully.
Right. But the reality was driven by desperate experimentation.
Because they were hungry.
Yeah.
Starvation is the ultimate engine for innovation.
Exactly. Hunger overrides the instinct for caution. When calories or medical remedies are scarce, a toxic plant is just a puzzle that hasn't been solved yet.
A puzzle. That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah. Humanity has spent millennia figuring out the specific, razor-thin margins of error required to interact with hazards. They weren't just throwing things in a pot. They were acting as primitive chemical engineers.
They had to systematically dismantle the plant's defenses.
Think about the underlying logic of traditional preparation methods. By boiling a toxic plant repeatedly and discarding the water each time,
Right, getting rid of the bad stuff.
yeah, early humans were utilizing heat to break down hazardous structural compounds. They were using water as a solvent to literally leach the water-soluble toxins out of the cellular structure,
Wow.
leaving behind only the caloric or medicinal value. It is an awe-inspiring process of turning a poison into a resource through sheer calculated risk.
It's an ancestral culinary extreme sport
It really is.
where the penalty for getting the recipe wrong is literal poisoning.
Yeah, you don't get a second chance sometimes.
No. And the knowledge of how to process Tarong like how many times to boil it, what parts to harvest, what season to pick it in, that was built on a foundation of generational casualties.
Absolutely.
Someone ate it raw and got incredibly sick. Someone boiled it once and got slightly less sick. The cultural database of traditional medicine was written through painful trial and error.
It was, and that profound history makes the deceptive appearance of the plant even more dangerous, I think.
Oh, definitely.
Because Black Nightshade doesn't broadcast its toxicity. It doesn't have defensive spikes, it doesn't emit a foul odor, and it doesn't utilize neon warning colors.
Oh, it looks great.
It produces plump, glossy fruit that perfectly mimics the agricultural products we have spent centuries breeding for safety.
It uses our own visual expectations against us. It invites you to consume it while possessing the chemical capacity to severely harm you. I mean, it is the ultimate Trojan horse of the botanical world.
Which is precisely why the traditional knowledge, that specific hard-won cultural understanding of how to handle Tarong Maranti, is the only thing standing between the utility of the plant and its danger.
Right. And let's be brutally honest here. Almost none of us possess that specific knowledge today.
No, very few people do.
If you are just a regular person walking down a city street, you don't have the ancestral database loaded into your head. You just see a purple tomato.
You lack the operating manual for the hazard. And without the manual, all you are left with is the threat.
So what does this all mean for the modern individual who actually crosses paths with this plant?
Well, the author makes it very clear.
Yeah, the author brings us to a very practical, non-negotiable conclusion. Given this massive contradiction, a highly toxic plant that looks delicious and hides a complex history of dangerous human consumption, the final verdict is definitive.
Very definitive.
The author states that regardless of how edible the glossy berries look, this plant is absolutely not for consumption.
The line is drawn firmly in the sand.
Yes. The golden rule established in the text leaves zero room for misinterpretation. Basically, never treat it as an edible vegetable. Instead, the author advises treating it strictly as an ornamental plant.
Ornamental. That is a profoundly interesting compromise.
Isn't it? It completely reframes our interaction with the plant.
Yeah.
It acknowledges the aesthetic appeal because those glossy, deep purple berries are undeniably beautiful, but it aggressively strips away any assumption of utility. It's a strict policy of, look, but absolutely do not ingest.
Right, because by categorizing it as ornamental, the author is advocating for a respectful boundary with wild nature.
A boundary we really need.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We are conditioned to believe that if a plant is visually appealing, it must be meant for us to consume or use in some way.
Right, like it's there for us.
Labeling it ornamental breaks that ego-driven cycle. It says we can appreciate the existence of Solanum nigrum without needing to conquer it or metabolize it or extract value from it.
It forces us to actively override our own biological impulses because your eyes and your hungry brain will insist it's a tiny tomato.
They really will.
But the expert taxonomy tells you it's a toxin. You have to consciously choose to trust the learned information over your own deceptive sensory input.
And this raises an important question about the reality of modern urban life, right?
How so?
Well, we live in an era where our connection to the origins of our food has been almost entirely severed.
Oh, completely.
The vast majority of our interactions with the natural world take place in highly curated, sterilized environments. Botanical gardens, manicured parks, or the produce aisle of a supermarket.
Everything is safe there.
Exactly. We've been trained to believe the environment is generally safe. If something looks like food in our daily lives, it usually is food. Every apple in the store has been selectively bred to be perfectly safe, sweet, and uniform.
Right. We have lost the healthy paranoia of the ancestral forager. We walk through the world assuming that because an area is populated by humans, the biological landscape has been neutralized. but a random wild plant pushing through a concrete street corner effortlessly shatters that illusion.
It really does.
It blurs the line between a domestic garden vegetable and a severe toxic threat, because the street corner is not actually domesticated.
No, it's not. Nature is constantly rebelling against the pavement.
Yes.
We are wandering through our own neighborhoods completely blind to the reality of the ecosystem operating right beneath our feet. We assume it's just harmless background scenery, a passive backdrop to our commute.
Right, just weeds.
But in reality, it's a wildly complex, potentially hazardous biological theater.
Biological theater, I love that.
And we simply do not possess the mental tools to differentiate a garden escapee from a toxic native without actively pausing to do the research. The familiar world is speaking a highly technical language that we have largely forgotten how to read.
And sometimes that forgotten language takes the form of deep purple berries that look exactly like a snack.
A very dangerous snack.
Yeah. So to bring all of this together, we started with what seemed like, the most mundane scenario imaginable. A casual walk past a neighborhood street corner,
Right.
a quick glance at some foliage, the immediate comforting assumption that it was just a harmless chili plant, or maybe some strange glossy tomatoes.
A flawless execution of a mental shortcut that led directly to a dangerous falsehood.
But by slowing down the tape and actually interrogating the plant's true identity, the author of this dispatch took us on a remarkable journey.
You really did.
We moved past the illusion of the familiar and collided with the wild reality of Black Nightshade. We unmasked Solanum nigrum, also known as Tarong Moranti, and confronted a botanical paradox.
Yeah.
We saw how a single weed can simultaneously hold the identities of a severe poison, a traditional medicine, and a master of visual disguise.
It serves as a stunning reminder of the sheer density of history, chemistry, and danger hiding in the most unremarkable urban spaces. The street corner is just a forest that has been temporarily paved over.
It truly is. Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
Yeah.
We have spent this entire time dissecting one specific observation on one specific street corner. But think about your own daily commute. Think about the spaces you walk through every single day, the landscape you assume you know perfectly.
The familiar routes where you operate entirely on autopilot.
Exactly. The next time you are walking around your own neighborhood, I want you to look closely at the untended borders.
Yeah, pay attention.
Look at the edges of the chain link fences, the overgrown empty lots, and those little green weeds tenaciously pushing their way up through the cracks in the sidewalk.
Not everywhere.
They are. How many of those ordinary, seemingly invisible pieces of background scenery are actually masters of botanical disguise? How many of them are quietly holding centuries of complex human history, potent traditional medicine, and dangerous chemistry right under your nose while you walk by, completely unaware?
That's a wild thought.
It really is. The natural world is always putting on a performance, even in the concrete jungle. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Stay curious, question your assumptions, and please don't eat the purple street tomatoes.